Good morning. Good morning, distinguished guests, visionaries, and innovators. We are in the Museum of the Future in Dubai with Joe Lepore from Foresight-Institute Group, Ian Oliver Schwarz from Bavarian Foresight-Institute, and Billie from Ipsos Strategy. Our guests are ready. 45 minutes is all we have. What makes a futurist? This topic is searing hot. So to give everyone a voice, we will be using Mentimeter to receive your questions live during the panel. To participate, use the QR code you will see on screen. I will start with the context and the problem statement, and then I will introduce our guests properly, and we will kick off. This is the Dubai Future Forum 2024 at the crossroads where future meets imagination, design, and ambition. Right, the future. What do we make of the future? I want to open with a quote from Apology of the Future by Luca Di Biase. Predicting the future is a gesture of power. Envisioning possible futures to enable informed decisions is an act of liberty. Forgetting the future is an unconditional surrender. Imagining the consequences of our everyday actions is a vital necessity. For individuals and communities alike, taking charge of writing their own future rather than leaving this responsibility to others is a choice that embodies the essence of civilization. End of quote. And the world of work takes notice. On LinkedIn, there are more than 44,000 people whose job title has the word future in it. But we as professionals struggle to build momentum and relevance in business, academia, and policy. Why? Well, we have three problem sets: culture, impact, and competency. Problem set one, culture. We have more than 15,000 people calling themselves futurists on LinkedIn, which are some 1,000 more than last year. Meanwhile, the Association of Professional Futurists counts 786 members, 150 more than last year, and the World Future Studies Federation is at 318, and many are members of both, and their figures include associations. There are thousands of people calling themselves futurists without having actual foresight education or experience. And no, a 3-day course doesn't count. Others use the word to identify an exercise in expertism, basically imagining the future from the vantage point of their competence. So veering towards futurism rather than foresight. And quoting Brian Alexander, futurist is the professional name non-professionals use around me. And just yesterday evening, someone came to me and said, "Oh, you're a futurist. In what field?" AI, quantum, education, implying that my expertise is in the future of, is knowing the future of X, not using the future. Problem set two, impact. This proliferation and identity confusion makes so that foresight professionals are not as commonly engaged by government institutions and business organizations as, say, economists. And it's easy to show that we have somewhere between 10,000 and 100,000 economists advising governments directly. Number of futurists, probably a fraction of a percentage point. Because of that, society is kept away from enjoying the dividends of a mature, systematic, and organic use of the future. At the same time, the lack of impact translates into the lack of work opportunities, with the result that we are starting to lose senior skilled professionals, like Alex Ferniani and others to whom I spoke directly or indirectly, and also diluting our overall competence because of the flooding I mentioned above. Problem set three, competency. Last year, we agreed on this panel that the way to hold those who work at the higher level to a higher standard is credentials. However, this means that we can get to widely agree on a core set of principles and tools that structure academic training. We don't. You know who does? You got it. Economists. Google it. Marion Fourcade. Thank me later. We preach to work with uncertainty, but in most of professional development paths out there, there is little education to uncertainty. And I've seen checklist approaches to facilitation, checklist approaches to education, checklist approaches to processes. We do have a Foresight competency model, but that is a framework and not a North Star. It's a start of this effort. So culture, impact, competency. If it had been easy, we wouldn't have had our guests today. Jo Lepore, an ex-marketer turned to strategic foresight and philosophy. When she's not leading foresight globally for McDonald's, she's the host of the Looking Outside podcast. And when not doing that, she's leading a nonprofit for corporate foresight leaders called FIG, Foresight Inside Group, which she is representing at the forum. Ian Oliver Schwarz, the professor of strategic foresight at the Technical University of Applied Science, Ingolstadt, and he leads the Bavarian Foresight-Institute. He holds a Master's of Philosophy in Futurist Studies from Stellenbosch and a PhD in Management and Foresight. His latest books include Strategic Foresight and Robust Leadership. Billie is with Ipsos consultancy team. She leads Ipsos Global Trends series. Her journey began in innovation consulting, and she now empowers colleagues and clients across diverse sectors to navigate complexity. So, too many futurists in too little time, to quote Alvin Toffler's future shock. So there is not enough common knowledge of the discipline for the people to recognize that there is a name for those using foresight professionally. Jo, what can we do to build awareness around this discipline and its use?
I don't know if you want to start with me because I'm going to be the positive troublemaker in this group.
That's exactly what I want to start with.
Excellent. So I was a little bit sad, actually, with your frame-up in the intro. Not to say that that isn't true, and that is the position that we're in. I think we in the foresight and future space work so hard to be taken seriously and to be credible and to do impactful work that when we see a lot of people crop up and use the futurist title or gain a lot of traction, I think, with senior leaders or with the industry, we get a little bit frustrated. So I recognize that. But if we're going to be protecting the foresight field for the future, we want people to come into it. I'm actually very optimistic and excited about the stats that you listed. I want more people to come in and be interested in foresight. Maybe they'll come in from an adjacent or an indirect field. They get excited about the concept. I mean, I don't know if any of us were excited to call ourselves a futurist. I actually think nobody probably comes in that way credibly. But, you wear it for a while and then you learn, you connect with other foresight practitioners, you go and get training, you get education. I actually believe the best training is on-the-job training. And then we become credible. I mean, there is such a thing as imposter syndrome. We all feel it. We start somewhere and then we build up our credibility. So I love the idea that people are really interested in coming into it. We know that aside from people who want to be in the field, there are many people who are placed in the field that come in from political science or, an economist will come in, a philosopher will come in, and then they're tasked with being a foresight professional in a business context, which is obviously what I'm representing on the panel, without any prior training or experience. Do I want to make them feel bad because they aren't coming in completely qualified and knowing exactly what they're doing? Absolutely not. I want them to feel welcome. I want them to feel like this is a community that will embrace them and help them and give them guidance around how do you become great at what you do and how do you create a positive impact with your work. So that's my troublemaker answer for your question.
That's an answer that I very much like, and I will readily redirect to Ian. So how do we build literacy with the overall public so that they understand that there is a professional board, a professional family that they can go to and create and build their competence?
I mean, I basically think it's about education. I mean, that's what we need to do in any types of engagement. If it is about doing workshops, engagement with citizens, educating students or professionals, it is really about starting with the fundamentals about what is the future of futures, what is about certainty and uncertainty, and I think it's a constant way of educating. And I, for instance, when I enter a room, I'm aware of that. I right away disappoint people because I don't have a crystal ball, even though I'm a professor of strategic foresight or future studies. And I don't know how the future will evolve, but I can help organizations and individuals think about that. And I think that's something that one constantly needs to press. And I mean, I really like your example of economists. I've worked for an economist as a strategic foresight guy, and that was difficult because there was that we know how it's going to be, and of course that is something that for a foresight person is difficult. And I think this is just a constant way of educating and hitting the same nail in a way, and making this clearer and clearer, and again pointing out that the future is open and that it's difficult to deal with, and that it requires a different mindset.
Billie, what is the difference between futurism futurists and foresight futurists? Is there a way to differentiate between the two of them? Do we have to work with to outline different products, different profiles, different skill sets?
It's interesting. We've just, at Ipsos, we do a global study called the Global Trend Series that I lead, and we question the general public across 50 countries. We spoke to 50,000 people around the world this year, and we actually ran a parallel survey with the GFS, looking at futurists and seeing how they compare with the general public. And from that work, and we carefully chose the people that we wanted to take part in the survey based on their backgrounds, their job titles, their experience in the field. And we found from that survey that people come into the discipline from all different backgrounds. They have all different job titles, they're tackling things from different angles. But I think what's more interesting is looking at the differences between people who either call themselves futurists or foresight practitioners, or this field that we're talking about, that we're all here today at this conference to discuss, versus the general public, and looking at the disconnect between those two groups. And I think that's really important because we've heard over the last few days the importance of bringing people on the journey with us, be it leaders within our organizations or within the clients that we're working for, who might be scared of the word foresight or scared of the idea of the future. But it's so important for them to use that in their discipline, in their strategic direction. But not only that, in working with local communities and getting people and citizens on board. So I think the work that we've done at Ipsos recently to look at the disconnect and the similarities between foresight professionals and the general public can help us understand some of our blind spots. If we're to take people on a journey with us, we need to really step into their shoes and understand things from their point of view. So, sort of to challenge you back on that, I'm not sure if the word or the title futurist or foresight professional is quite a challenge, but I think we've got bigger challenges at play, like our disconnect between us and who we're doing this work for.
I think we'll get to this again, maybe towards the end of the panel, when we're going to talk about competency and what draws individuals and the people at large to getting to the strategic foresight field, and if there's something that maybe gets you more approachable or leaning into the field rather than maybe an average, more common profile. So I want to move, as time goes, I want to move to the problem set 2 about impact. I think it's kind of related to what Billie just said, because us professionals, we can immediately tell apart futurism and foresight, and good foresight from unsuitable foresight. But the average client or a stakeholder usually cannot. How can they assess if a foresight professional is doing good or appropriate foresight? I want to start with a troublemaker.
Well, hopefully they have a foresight practitioner in their business who can help them to do that.
Oh, that's not, no.
That's the song, sorry. I mean, experience, obviously, is the best way. You learn through your mistakes. We've all done terrible foresight projects that, looking back, we say, oh, that wasn't the right methodology, or I didn't set that up in the right way, or I didn't sell that through to my stakeholder in the right way. So I think it's really important that we continue to reflect on our own work and hold ourselves to a really high account. Of course, celebrate our wins and where we're doing well, but also, look back and say, and speak to people that we served with our foresight work to say, what didn't land with you, or what was too complex, or did this actually go through into your action plans? Did you do anything with this? So learning through our past work, I think, is a really good way to do that. I also think that I've been kind of going back and forth on whether foresight or futures thinking or futures literacy is an innate skill, something that we have in us that just needs to be nurtured through time and through discipline and application. And I've been speaking to a lot of people during the forum, if you got that question from me. Thank you for your answer, because I think the clear alignment and consistency across everybody is yes, it's an innate thing that can be taught. So if we look at it that way, thinking about the future and being open, curious, bringing in different perspectives, connecting different dots, and then thinking about the right tool to apply that with is something that we can all do. That's kind of what we're saying. So then we just need the foundational knowledge and training to be able to know how do you bring that through and how do you apply that with the right kind of methodology. And again, like progress over perfection, right? Like we learn through our mistakes. So I don't believe in giving ourselves too much of a hard time that we haven't picked the exact right methodology, because at least you're doing foresight, and that's the most important thing.
Joel, I very much like your answer, because you unknowingly started to answer to several of the questions that I'm seeing flowing on the Mentimeter, which I will spell out explicitly also for Ian and Bill to have an opportunity to answer. Here's 3 questions that connect to what we're doing right now. Futurist work is often said to deliver lukewarm outcomes that does not drive actions. Do you agree? If yes, is the fault in the futurist or the client? Yeah. Hold this thought for a second. Also, add to this, how do you validate your work and processes as futurists, all connected? And third of this, foresight is, no, it's not this one. Okay, well, I'll just go with these 2. Oh, no, here it is. How do you validate your work and processes as futurists? Ian, I kind of unloaded this onto
yes. I mean, I think the issue really is if you look at the client-consultant relationship and those kind of engagements, do you have a clear understanding of what you want to achieve and what it takes to achieve that? Meaning, for instance, if I need to engage leadership, then I can achieve actionable insights with a foresight process. If I do not have that access, I need to ask myself as a consultant, am I doing it for the money, or am I doing it for the impact? And if I'm just doing it for the money, then this is something we're probably not going to have anything which is around follow-up work, because it just doesn't resonate. And I think then at the end of the day, if it comes to validating the processes or the approaches I choose, it's very much about am I able to move the needle with the client together in a foresight work, and I think that's the most important thing. Am I really able to achieve what have been asked for? And I think that's also being honest, saying, okay, if I'm just asked to deliver a report, And that might be it. And if there is no actionable insights on that, that is maybe because also the client wasn't asking for it, because then it's just that.
This is, again, to the whole panel. Connecting to what we've had also from the audience. The Foresight competency model, framing, scanning, futuring, visioning, designing, adapting. I have a feeling that most of the general population and general clients that come to us as Foresight community, they believe that Foresight is only imagining futures, and then there's an applied part of Foresight that is doing something with those futures. Whereas we as a professional community should convey that Foresight is always applied. Good Foresight is always applied. Billie, what's your experience with this?
Yeah, it's I always know if a project is going to land well or completely fail at the beginning when I ask my clients how engaged are their multiple stakeholders going to be in the process. And if they say to me, oh, it's going to be very hard to get access to X, Y, and Z, I know that project's going to be really hard to run and really hard to land on the end. One of my colleagues always used to say you've got to get people on the bus at the beginning so that they're still on the bus at the end, and I think that's really important. With Foresight, it's a journey that you do together with a client, you don't do to a client. And I think to connect impact to real business problems, you absolutely have to take that journey together.
A question to the whole panel. What's the best way to engage organizations on Foresight? Who want to take this first? Not the troublemaker.
Well, I think Billie actually said it. It's engagement. It's really engagement. It's as you said. It's a journey. And I think those project eyewitnesses, which went very well, is about engaging people from the beginning to the end. And that can be on different scales. Doesn't need to be that everybody is in all the workshops all the time, but that you have that level of engagement. And I think the project eyewitnesses that were complete failures where you at the end presented something to people that were not connected somehow to the project. So I think it's really about that level of engagement, and because that includes that level of educating people as well, what Foresight work is actually about.
Yeah, I completely...
Joe,
sorry.
Go ahead. No, go ahead.
I was going to say, I completely
ahead,
agree.
Billie.
I think there's a module of Foresight literacy at the start of every project. It's really important, particularly when you have stakeholders at different layers of the organization at different stages of that education in the space. I had a really good conversation with a client recently, and went really well, really good framing session, and then she said, okay, so we're going to talk to our stakeholders about predicting the future, and it was sort of like, okay, we need to reset here and start again. But it's, education at the beginning is important.
Yeah. Joe, what's your take from the corporate world?
Yeah, I agree. Education is really important. And getting access to the right stakeholders. So I don't think those things are incorrect. Obviously, my perspective is different because I've never worked agency side. I've always been inside of big brands and working from the inside. And obviously now through FIG, we were talking about this actually just yesterday, that when an agency delivers a Foresight output, we then, as Foresight practitioners inside that business, do 60% of the work to translate it, because that's the brief, and that's fine, because you are trying to create the link between not only what the project ambition was in investigating, researching a topic of the future or creating scenarios, but then pulling it through to a roadmap for the business. So how would we do this, and when should we do this, and who in the business should do this, and how much is it going to be worth? All of that work happens after the project is handed over. And I do think that's a perfectly fine way to do it, but it obviously means that there's just a lot of translating that needs to happen, and maybe this is a little bit of a disconnect in pulling Foresight through to businesses, because you need it to align to the business strategy, the business challenge, the crisis that you're trying to fight right now. The personalities of the senior stakeholders, so you might get access to them, but then kind of how they roll and how to tailor the work to them. And of all of that information and those beautiful 50-page decks that you get and all of those scenarios, you know what is that one little nugget that you're going to pull through that's going to make an impact at the right time, in the right forum, with the right stakeholder. Thank you. One clap. Woo. I can go now. So I think I'm not saying that to say that you need a dedicated foresight person in every single business. But what we are obviously seeing is a growth of that. We know that at the moment there's 35% of businesses in Europe and the Americas that have dedicated resourcing, which is fantastic. We see this growing. And what we often say as foresight practitioners in the corporate world is that you don't necessarily need that, because there are so many people in a business, in the corporate landscape, that do foresight. This is kind of going back to your first question, is do they qualify? Would they be called a futurist? No. But they do foresight, absolutely. Our sustainability teams are doing foresight. Our supply chain teams are doing foresight. Our strategy teams are doing foresight. So it's being able to connect with those people in a business that can help to translate it to a business context and make it as easy as possible for that senior stakeholder to act on the future intelligence.
When you talk about doing 60% of the weightlifting from a report to the actual organizational impact, are you talking about a generic report that comes out from like the World Economic Forum, or you're talking about something that you have specifically commissioned?
So if it's a commissioned piece of research is what I was referring to, but we get these macro reports that are incredibly insightful and incredibly helpful. From that, you probably spend 95% of the time translating that into here's how it's connected into the business challenge that you're facing, or here's why it's worthwhile even reading this thing. So again, going back to the research that's been done on the foresight field, we know that 90% of organizations are getting this kind of intelligence, not from a dedicated foresight team, but that intelligence from the broader industry and community. So they are hungry for this kind of future intelligence. They want to be more informed. We know CEOs from the PwC CEO survey every year, they're telling us, we don't know if our business is going to be around in the next 10 years because of all of these long-term macro forces of change, these mega trends. So they want to work with all of us to better understand what's happening in the world and how can I make sure that my business is ready to react. I love the Sahel quote around foresight being a tool for change. So oftentimes, I think maybe we think of foresight or futures intelligence as a little bit passive, like here you go. But if it's a tool for change, we need to use it like a tool, right? We're building something, which means we need to build it together.
Ian, talking about what happens and with your students and with the organizations that you're working with, what is something that you would say is something that you should never do as a foresight professional?
That's a good question. I think what you should never do is create that idea or atmosphere that we can exactly predict the future. I think that's something what I'm hitting in my courses really hard on, and I have an oral exam at the end of my course, and I say I really don't want to hear the word prediction. If any one of those mentions that foresight is about doing predictions, this is right, that's the moment where I'm really sad, because I think spend a half a year together and then that's what you come up with. I think that's really, really, really important to really all the time nail on that aspect of saying, okay, if we start thinking about the future, we need to consider futures and be open and accept that there are multiple plausible futures. And always trying to understand are there other languages than the English language that knows not just future but futures, which is not the case in German. And that's something for me which is really central.
Billie, I'm reading from the questions that are flowing, and I can guarantee you there's a ton of them. So you're really making my life difficult, and I love it. Thank you. Keep doing it. It's amazing. We would have never been able to have this kind of engagement if we had a flying microphone going around. Billie, what's the worst thing of being in Foresight?
Thanks for that one, whoever asked that question. I think it just goes back to what we were saying. It's having clients. I mean, in the last week, I've had clients ask me to predict the future, ask me to measure the future, tell me what the biggest future will be, and it's just frustrating. And I think it comes back to the point that we were talking about literacy, and I think that comes back to our educational systems. I was thinking about this a lot over the past few days because I've met some people from Teach the Future who are trying to get foresight education into the education system. And we obviously had a lot on some of the panel debates as well about the importance of educating children in this space. And it was making me think about the futures triangle and how our education system is very much founded on today and the past. But if we could just make sure that people from a very young age also think about the future, I think that would help with some of these challenges that we overcome. So yeah, that would be the worst thing.
Can I answer that one?
Yeah, go ahead.
That's a fun one. I want to answer that. I think that sometimes we live in an ivory tower still, very much in the foresight field. And we're seen as being a little elitist, like only certain people are allowed to sit in this forum and only certain people know what's coming in the future or have all the knowledge. And I think we need to break that down. So it's not necessarily something that is common across everyone, but it's definitely something that I think we need to work on as a foresight function or field, or as a group of people who are doing something to benefit society, to benefit others, is making sure that we're not coming across as know-it-alls, basically.
Yeah, well, I completely agree, also because the future is unknowable, so we do not know what's going to come in the future, and nobody does. And whoever says the contrary, they are probably tricking you into thinking they can. This, I think, speaks to the first point that we were making about literacy. How can we tell whether someone is doing good foresight or not so good foresight, or if they're doing foresight at all? So what should foresight education look like? And with this question, we're moving now into the third problem set about competency. Ian, I'm looking at you.
I mean, that's what we at the Bavarian Foresight-Institute and the Technical University of Ingolstadt, what we kind of start doing in the first semester with our master students, is that we start about talking about what the future of futures is, what that means to think about that, why we as humans have numerous cognitive limitations that make it difficult for us to deal with all of that, or to recognize what is happening outside our periphery or our organization. So I think that's really the starting point about those two elements. Understanding how can we make sure that we reduce blind spots in terms of what's happening around us, and how can we, second point, create an open perspective and start thinking about multiple futures. And I usually do with my students a scenario planning project during the semester, and it's usually that wonderful journey of excitement, total chaos and frustration with all the different trends and the uncertainties, and then finally discovering that there is a way to structure this and get an idea what are multiple futures, and that you can actually get a hand on that. And I think that's in a way what is essential for me when it comes to educating foresight. It's really about understanding how can we reperceive reality, as Pierre Wack said it so nicely in one of his Shell articles, and how can we develop alternative pictures of the future. I think that's really the two essential parts for me.
Yeah, and I want to insist a little bit with you, because one of the points of building competency is how do we weave in the concept of uncertainty and with it, creativity, imagination, and the concept of how you facilitate with work with people. Because again, as Joe's saying, we're not in the ivory tower. We're not expertists. We're not doing futurism. We're working towards foresight. How do we weave in this concept of uncertainty and creativity and imagination while having a way to measure foresight without destroying entirely this constructivist experience?
I mean, I think it starts with, I think a nice way is, giving all the examples of predictions in the past. And that's, an exercise you could spend probably weeks on. It's good fun, right? Looking at what did experts like 30, 40 years ago say, for instance, if we have a personal computer at home? And experts saying, no, of course not. And I think it's a way of educating at that point students saying, okay, if somebody is going to tell you that AI is going to take all away the jobs, be cautious, because how would that person know? Same thing 10, 15 years ago when it was around digitalization. Everybody says, okay, this is going to take away jobs, we will have massive unemployment in Germany, and now try to find an IT expert. That's really difficult. And I think it starts with that. And then I think measuring foresight is, I wouldn't even go in that direction. So I would say I will not be the one that you can come back to and say, okay, you said this and that in the scenarios. Say it's about the process. It really is about the process. And you can work with the scenarios, but it is about being aware that based on what we know today, we can construct scenarios, but that can change over time. So it's, I think, really about the process and about how we develop within that process and how we work with the scenarios, but being aware, for instance, that this is something that can change and that then needs to be reevaluated and redone. But I think it's not really, I wouldn't even talk about measurement.
Billie, you're in the business of quantitative stuff. Talk to me.
Well, some of our business is in quantitative. We're a very wide research organisation, don't you know? No, so we, in terms of thinking about measurability or credibility, we make sure that we look at a diverse range of inputs into the foresight work we do. So obviously we're looking at the macro drivers of change. As a research organisation, we've got a ton of back data and current data from a person-centric level, so looking at how attitudes and values are changing over time. And then, of course, spotting signals of change on the ground is really important, and it's bringing that together. So really building the measurability or the statistics and the evidence into the process to come up with the end piece, the scenario or the trends or whatever you're creating for your client. And that's where, when we sort of talk to clients, when they say, hey, we want measures, we want data, we want statistics in there, it's about bringing that into the input rather than it being an output per se.
I want to turn, so we're 6 minutes and 48 seconds before the end of this panel. I want to be very mindful of everyone's time. I have probably 50 questions here, so it's completely impossible for me to go through every single one of them. I have to pick in 15 seconds for each of you. Can you give an example where your work made an impact? Joe.
Oh, goodness. Of course you start with me. 15 seconds. I can't answer any question in 15 seconds, as you've probably gathered already. The thing that I'm most proud of with the foresight work that I've done in corporations is the futures literacy piece, actually. So where you can train and upskill people from across the organization, as we say, to make smarter, faster, better decisions with the future in mind. So pushing people to think long term. And when you see that flow through to how they're creating strategies and plans, how they're even having conversations, how they're using the word anticipation instead of prediction, that's my proudest moment.
Thank you. Thank you for...
Was that 15 seconds?
Thank you for keeping it to a tweet.
Okay.
Thank you for keeping it to a tweet. Ian.
Well, I think the most successful work I've done was a scenario planning process. We did more in the fashion of an open strategy process, so including a lot of people, at the end having 10% of the organization within that process. And that at the end was not just talking about the scenarios for a certain industry, but really moving an entire organization into the position of being ready to change and reallocate resources.
Billie.
I think the great thing about working agency side is you get such a diverse perspective from lots of different clients. There are lots of examples. I think they say plagiarism is the greatest form of flattery. I think when I was briefed from one of my clients about a project they wanted to do to build a new trends framework for their organization, and they presented back to me my own thinking and said, we'd like to use this model. I think that was a pretty good moment.
I want to move to a more personal dimension, looking at the present, at the past, and at the future of our foresight professionals to be. Present, how can you be a better foresight practitioner? Whoever wants to go first. Ian.
I think it's leveraging networks and being aware of the great work that's been done in the past in terms of how to do it. And I think that's really valuable going back to some of the older stuff. I think that's really helpful. Not reinventing the wheel all the time.
Joe.
Connect with as many people as you can. Create a community where you can connect with people who do what you do so that you can share what works, what doesn't work, learn from and with each other, and then connect with people outside of it. So get out of the foresight bubble, connect with real people, going back to the point that Billie made. Understand how our views in foresight and futures differ from the everyday average person, because there is quite a gap there.
I think never stop learning, stay curious, and always, to Joe's point, take a step outside of the challenge you're working in, the industry you're working in, and look in from a different direction, because that can help uncover new ideas and new inspiration.
Let me move to the past now. What advice would you give to your old self who was just starting in foresight? Then this is our top voted question from the audience.
Oh, goodness.
Joe, you want to think about it a little more? Ian.
That's a tough one, because looking at my personal past in terms of foresight, I actually pretty much liked what I did. So,
but it doesn't have to be a modification of what you've done. I mean, like, keep doing what you're doing. You're doing great.
Yes, I mean I went for a formal education. That was kind of. I felt that was a good way to do it. Yeah.
Good.
Yeah.
Good. I like this. Great. I mean, this is some positivity here. Billie.
I think follow your heart a little bit more or a bit more quickly. We were doing trends and foresight work within our organization in different ways, in different places, and I finally brought everyone together to say, hey, let's discuss and share ideas. I just wish I'd done that 5 years previously.
Okay, I'm ready now. Thank
Go
you
ahead,
for the
then.
extra time. I probably would have gotten formal accreditation or education of foresight earlier. I got it when I started the job, and I think I was really skeptical about it, if I'm being honest. I'm like, I already know what I'm doing. I don't need this. And then I got more and more, and I felt like my work improved tremendously from that. Did I need it? Do I need a PhD in futures? I don't think so. But certainly it helps me to think about different methods to apply, and looking back, I wish that I had done that a lot earlier in my foresight journey.
You're ready to give some advice now to the future, and advice for future foresight practitioners.
Yeah, I can start. I'm ready with that one.
All right.
Move forward into the future with humility. Know that you don't know everything. The advice that we give to other people, to clients, to people that we work with, that the only constant is uncertainty. Treat your life and your work in the same way. So be humble.
Ian, what's your advice for future
Just
generations?
really briefly, be cautious of using AI. I think that's a huge danger. While there is potential, there's a huge danger in that as well.
We had some shout out from the back of the room. Billie, your closing words.
Don't forget that people are the future. I'm going to leave it there.
All right.
Nice.
All right, so I invite all the room to join me in a big round of applause to our panelists. Thank you so very much. This was an extremely engaging session. I enjoyed it a lot. I hope you did as well. Thank you, everyone, and enjoy your forum and make the best out of it. Thank you.